And over the past few decades, archaeology has brought another check on the story as told in the Bible. Excavations in the land of the Israelites have clarified their history, sometimes at the expense of the biblical storyline. When you put all this together, a reading of the Canaanite texts, a selective decoding of the biblical texts, and a new archaeological understanding of Israelite history, you get a whole new picture of the Abrahamic God. It's a picture that, on the one hand, absolves Abrahamic monotheism of some of the gravest charges against it, yet on the other hand, challenges the standard basis of monotheistic faith. It's a picture that renders the Abrahamic God in often unflattering terms, yet charts his maturation and offers hope for future growth. And certainly it's a picture very different from the one drawn in the average synagogue, church, or mosque. God in the flesh. For starters, though Yahweh may have wound up in a realm apart, a remote, even transcendent God whose presence is felt subtly, this is not the kind of God that comes across in the earliest scriptures, fragments of the Bible that may go back as far as the closing centuries of the second millennium BCE. In fact, even in the first millennium BCE, when most of Genesis took shape, God was a hands-on deity. He personally planted the Garden of Eden, and he made garments of skin for Adam and Eve, and clothed them. And he doesn't seem to have done these things while hovering ethereally above the planet. After Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit, according to Genesis, they heard the sound of the Lord God walking in the garden at the time of the evening breeze, and the man and his wife hid themselves from the presence of the Lord God among the trees of the garden. Hiding may sound like a naive strategy to deploy against the omniscient God we know today, but apparently he wasn't omniscient back then. For the Lord God called to the man and said to him, "Where are you?" In short, Yahweh is, at this point, remarkably like all those primitive gods of hunter-gatherer societies and chiefdoms, strikingly human, with supernatural power to be sure, but not with infinite power. It may seem strange that the God who created the whole universe would be limited in his powers, but it isn't clear that the God who is walking through the Garden of Eden did create the universe. True, he created the earth and sky, and he created human beings out of dust. But the part about creating stars and the moon and the sun and light itself, the story in the first chapter of Genesis, seems to have been added later. In the beginning, so far as we can tell, Yahweh was not yet a cosmic creator. And if you go back to the poems that most scholars consider the oldest pieces of the Bible, there's no mention of God creating anything. He seems more interested in destroying. He is, in large part, a warrior God. What some believe to be the oldest piece of all, Exodus 15, is an ode to Yahweh for drowning Egypt's army in the Red Sea. It begins, "I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. Horse and rider he has thrown into the sea. The Lord is a warrior." If Yahweh starts life as a warrior God, not a CEO, much less chairman of the board, then who is running the universe? The answer seems to be that various other gods were. Back then, polytheism reigned. The point here isn't just that some Israelites worshipped gods other than Yahweh. That much has long been clear to even the casual Bible reader. Much of the Bible's plotline can be summarized as Israelites fall for non-Yahweh gods. Yahweh punishes them. Israelites mend their ways, only to stray again from fidelity, get punished again, and so on. The point, rather, is that even Israelites who didn't worship gods other than Yahweh still believed in their existence. Early affirmations of devotion to Yahweh don't single him out for being the only God, just for being the best God for the Israelites, the one you should worship. That ancient hymn to Yahweh, Man of War, asks the question, "Who is like thee, O Lord, among the gods?" Indeed, the Bible sometimes mentions other gods matter-of-factly. In the book of Numbers, for example, When the Moabites are conquered, it says that their god, Chemosh, has made his sons fugitives and his daughters captives. And when the Bible doesn't note the existence of other gods, it may imply as much. The Scriptures warn Israelites not to serve other gods and bow down to them, lest the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you. Would the Bible's authors here and elsewhere have warned against serving other gods, if those gods didn't even exist? And would Yahweh have declared himself a jealous God if there were no gods to be jealous of? Apparently, God himself didn't start life as a monotheist. Even God's most famous demand for devotion, "You shall have no other gods before me," as he puts it in Exodus, hardly excludes the existence of other gods. In other words, before Israelite religion denied the existence of all gods other than Yahweh, it went through a phase of granting their existence, but condemning their worship, by Israelites at least. If the Moabites wanted to worship Chemosh, that was their business. In technical terms, Israelite religion reached monotheism only after a period of monolatry, exclusive devotion to one God without denying the existence of others. This much is accepted by most biblical scholars, including some who are believing Jews or Christians. But things get more controversial when you suggest that there was a long time when even monolatry was too strong a word for mainstream Israelite doctrine, a time when not all non-Yahweh gods were considered evil or alien, a time when Yahweh was ensconced in an Israelite pantheon, working alongside other gods. Yet if you read the Scriptures closely, you will see hints of such a time. The Bible famously says that God created man in his own image. But those aren't Yahweh's words. When Yahweh is actually quoted in the previous verse, he says, "Let us make man in our image, after our likeness." Then when Adam eats the forbidden fruit, Yahweh says, "Behold, the man has become like one of us, knowing good and evil." When people start building the Tower of Babel, which will reach to the heavens, and Yahweh opts for preemptive intervention, he says, "Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." Us? Who is us? If you ask this question of some Jewish or Christian clergy, you may get such answers as angels or the heavenly host, God's army. In other words, Yahweh may be accompanied by other supernatural beings, but none of them qualify as gods. The Bible says otherwise. It talks more than once about a divine council in which God takes a seat, and the other seats don't seem to be occupied by angels. Psalm 82 says, "God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods he holds judgment." And God himself, addressing the other council members a few verses later, says, "You are gods." The many biblical references to the existence of multiple gods are, in a sense, amazing. For though the Bible was composed over many centuries, the earliest parts of it passed through the hands of later editors who decided which books and verses to keep and which to discard, and who seem to have had a bias against polytheism.